Hello, everyone. Welcome to another section of WABC Cop Talk. Today, Kevin is not available. He's on another one of his covert missions. Next time I see him, I will ask him where he is. We have joining us today two distinguished retired New York City Police Department veterans, Sergeant Rory Capra and Detective Tony Mock. Both of them and myself have links to the movie industry, which makes this session quite interesting. Tony has produced a movie called Ramsey, and I am related to the famous playwright and movie maker David Mamet. And Rory is the nephew of the famous Frank Capra from A Wonderful Life and the World War II series of How We Fight. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Ed, pleasure to be here with you today.
Rory, tell us about your background.
Well, sure. I grew up in somewhat of an idyllic setting. I was up in Lake Champlain in the Adirondack Mountains, a small village where going to school up there was quite a unique experience, and you got to do a lot of the outdoor things that people do when they go on vacation, and that was routine for me. We did the hunting, the fishing. In the wintertime, we did ice fishing. I actually walked across one time on Lake Champlain, which was always a challenge when you were a young kid. We would walk across Lake Champlain. It was the challenge, the dare, to see if you could get all the way across to the Vermont side, because there was always the danger in the middle. The ice doesn't freeze as hard, and you could go down. So it was a very nice experience growing up. But from there, I came. I had the desire to come into the police department, and when I looked around for police departments, although the state police was a calling back then, because everybody upstate, that was the agency. Everybody wanted to be part of the state police, but in my heart, I always wanted to be part of NYPD. The New York City Police, to me, was the epitome of policing, and it's something that I said, you know what, if you're going to be in any field, you want to be the best in that field. So that's why I wanted to come to NYPD, and I took the tests, and eventually I did get hired. I started actually a police career as far back as 1982, but I did a little over 35 years with the New York City Police, and it was a wonderful experience. I worked on patrol initially in the South Bronx. I did anti-crime for quite a few years. I was, as we say, a collar guy. I made quite a few arrests, and I went into OCCB for a time. That's the Organized Crime Control Bureau, which is now essentially under the Detective Bureau. But at that time, it was a separate bureau dealing a lot with narcotics issues. That was quite an interesting experience as well. Got involved with several shooting incidents when on the OCCB team. So there was quite a few things there. But then eventually, all that changed when I became a supervisor, and then I became more of an administrator. I wound up going to Manhattan, which was a whole new world for me, coming to Manhattan from the South Bronx, and that was in the mid-'90s. And I wound up going to Central Park, which is literally everyone in the city's backyard. It was a great place. There's millions of tourists and visitors every year, and it was a wonderful place to work. I had fantastic experiences there.
And lots of squirrels.
And lots of squirrels, yeah.
Go on. Anything else?
No, I think that's pretty good. I mean, that's just a broad, I don't want to take up too much of your time with it, but yeah,
well,
I think that's a broad,
you said you came from the Lake
experience.
Champagne region.
Yeah.
Are you any relation to the Abenaki Indians?
No, I don't think so, but you never know. It could be in there.
Also, you once told me a story when you were in the South Bronx. You encountered the Shah, or the Shah's.
It was a relative of the Shah of Iran. Yeah. They broke down on the Bruckner Expressway, and I wound up changing tires for them. Yes. It was. I don't know if this is a sister now. I don't remember, but it was something for Faradiba, that was the Shah's wife at the time. Yes, and there was a little entourage with them in the cars.
She was called the Shavanu.
Yeah, the Shavanu.
Tony, what about you? I understand you made this movie, Ramsey.
Yes.
So we'll get to it in a minute, but can you give us your background?
Yes, it's hard shoes to follow with following Rory's resume, but I grew up in Queens. I grew up in Woodside, as you can hearing my accent. How could I not go into police work when my whole neighborhood was Irish Catholic and they all came on the job? So it was like a logical following. You know, I either became a priest or a cop. You know, that was the two things you become when you grow up in Woodside. So we took the test, came on the job. Actually, my brother and I came on the job. We were the first, brother team in the NYPD. So, we did NSU. You remember NSU? Went to the 104, the 109. I did undercover work. I went to narcotics. I was temporary on loan to a lot of units, the homicide squad. I went to the gang division. I went underground for a while. But I consider myself a robbery guy. I spent I did 35 years on the job, and I did about 25 of that in the robbery squad. So, and I finished at a night watch. And then along the way, I had major stops. I also got posted overseas with the job. The job actually sent 50 of us to Bosnia-Herzegovina. Another 25 went to Haiti. That was under the Bratton administration. A great experience.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah. So, and here I am, making movies.
Tell us about your movie.
I co-produced it with Chris Suarez, a retired MOS from Task Force. He's the brains behind the whole operation. I co-produced it. Chris, brilliant, came in second place at the Austin Film Festival for his script, and he's been writing ever since. He got me into a film as a cameo, and then we've been in contact. When he did Ramsey, he sent me the script, or as we say, the treatment. That's what we call scripts. And he said, can you edit this and see how accurate it is from a police standpoint or from a detective standpoint? And, of course, I red-penciled it. And, Chris says, if you think you can do so good, let's make a film. And, the rest is history. So Ramsey is out, came out during COVID. I have a film to my name. It's on cable. It's on Amazon Prime, Tubi, and Google Play. So we have movie stat. Please watch.
Well, hopefully our listeners and viewers will seek out the movie and watch it.
Thank you so much.
Now, getting back to law enforcement, there are many issues that are current. I'd like to mention the first one, the hot topics, illegal immigration. As we know, it's not just a New York City problem, it's a nationwide problem. And it's a problem for the police because the police are the first ones on the scene in many of these cases, and they're the eyes and ears. I think New York City police has the major problem because it's becoming more and more apparent that many of them have criminal backgrounds, particularly the Venezuelans. So what's your opinion, Rory? Tony, either one can speak first.
Well, no, I think you're right. I mean, exactly. It is becoming a major problem for policing because you have to deal with that and the laws that apply as well. New York City being still considered a sanctuary city, so there's a lot of things that we are not permitted to do in terms of dealing with the migrants that are coming in. We even if we find they have some records, we can't necessarily interact with other agencies. Federal, we can't interact with ICE or other agencies from a reporting standpoint. So yes, it is problematic. What do we do with these migrants and yet at the same time treat them with essentially the same rights as the average citizen because we are under constitutional constraints. Now that they're here, those laws, they're subject to those laws and we're subject to the constraints of law enforcement in dealing with them.
Tony?
Listen, we're a nation of immigrants. I can say all of us at this table are all children or grandchildren of immigrants. But there's a rule to follow. We have to follow the law. That's number one. And it's not just a criminal standpoint. It's a national security issue.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
Right? Because people crossing this border, we have, I think last month they caught 5,000 Chinese. So nationals crossing the border. So it's not like somebody from the continent to South America inching their way up. They got on a plane or a boat from the mainland and came over to cross the border. I think There was a few Jordanian nationals that tried to infiltrate a base, and we don't know who these people are. It's the perfect Manchurian candidate, to sneak in, get a new set of documents.
Sure.
And it's not just crime, it's national security. Crime is a minor thing compared to...
And that was, I think that was the Marine base, Ed.
Yeah, that was
Close to your heart as a former
Regarding
Marine.
the Chinese, I heard on the radio somebody mentioned that China knows everybody that's leaving. So there's no secret who they're sending here.
Sure.
And that the allegation is that it's planned to send these people here. And, another point that's very important, the Secretary of Mayorkas, he keeps saying that they vet people. What I'm saying is, how do you vet people from Venezuela or any other country where you have no contact with them? What are you going to check them against?
Right.
Yeah, the vetting's kind of a misnomer because they're really not being vetted, because what are you vetted against? They don't have any documents. They're coming with no documents, and whatever they profess to be or whoever they profess to be is what you're going with. But we have no way of actually verifying that.
Right. There's no database to run it against.
Sure.
The only databases that are available are our own.
Sure.
In the States. But we don't have access to the databases to Venezuela, China, Syria, all these other countries. I mean, they're basically hostile toward us.
Right. And they're not going to answer your emails.
Yeah, they're not going to, yeah.
Right? Here's a request. Can you see? They're not going to answer it.
And I'm sure, Tony, you would probably know, because even if you try to do something with Interpol, they don't necessarily have anything either. So there's nothing.
The information is only as good as what they get or what they give you.
Right.
They're the perfect sleeper,
Right.
the sleeper, and, you have no docs, no documents.
Well, we used to say, kind of like garbage in, garbage out, right? So if we have bad information coming in, but that's what we're going to go with. That's what we have. Yeah.
The shame of it is that the police are usually the first ones to encounter these people, either, as an aided case, a traffic stop, an arrest, and police would learn that they're illegals, but nobody can work with ICE. They're not allowed to, especially in New York. That's a big problem. And I suppose in other areas. So there's no coordination, and it's absolutely absurd. And I think we have a time bomb that's ticking with these people.
That's correct. Yeah. And, the other hidden secret is the major felonies. Remember the 7 majors we used to have? Yes. If you're a victim of that crime and you're an illegal, undocumented...
Illegal alien,
you get expedited for processing to become a legitimate resident of this country. So you get your visa stamped. It's a U visa, I believe, because you were a victim of a certain category of crimes. So.
But how do you prove that? How do they prove that?
Well, they'll reach out and ask for the police report, or they'll have, listen, people need help. We're here to help. But some people game the system, and there's a lot of legitimate people that really honestly need help.
Sure.
But we have to separate.
But the law of unintended consequences with that is you're going to have people, as you say, gaming the system. You could have people now, as a whole cottage industry, becoming professional crime victims so that they can expedite.
Correct, and that's a real hidden secret.
Yeah.
I mean, before I left, I used to get requests like, were you the one that handled this case? Do you remember this person? And, of course, you refer everything to legal, but they wanted you to sign an affidavit like, yes, they were a victim. I said, no, we don't. We have to send it off to our legal department. But I would get maybe at least a dozen off the top of my head of victims. And, and every victim, I don't triage and say, well, you're the commissioner's son, you're a regular citizen, you're an illegal. We're all victims of crime. They all get treated, and I don't ask for their legal status. It's not until later on do I get a letter from their attorney or some social agency requesting that, and that's how you know.
Recently we interviewed Gianello, Mr. Gianello, who was the director of the New York City division of ICE. And he said things are so bad that they actually have conducted simultaneous investigations with the PD, but neither knew about the other. And he talked of a specific case where they were about to arrest somebody, and the New York City Police Department showed up to arrest them also, and everybody was in plain clothes.
Right.
There could have been a shootout.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He said that there was absolutely no coordination between. They're not allowed to deal with the police. It's very frustrating. You know, and this all goes back to Koch, because I remember when I was a detective, we would often encounter illegals and turn them over to ICE. It was no problem. When Koch became the mayor, shortly thereafter, he declared that the police will no longer be involved in immigration matters. So, and then de Blasio made it worse because he introduced legislation to the city council to codify what Koch said. So now it's law. It's law in New York City that you can't do anything about it. And there's a move to have a referendum in November, whether or not we should remain a sanctuary city. So it's a major, major problem. Now, getting on to another problem, another topic that's hot, the pro-Hamas protests. Tony, what's your opinion?
Pro-Hamas. Listen, this country is great.
Or pro-Hamas, anti-Israel?
Your right to protest is great. You know, the free assembly, we've gone to demonstrations. But when it gets violent and you're not giving people the right to speak your share, okay? I mean, these pro-Hamas people, these protesters, you want to protest, that's fine. I may agree, I may not agree, but the fact that you're shutting down or prohibiting people to go into a synagogue, a shul, you know, that's not right. That takes everything off the table in terms of civility, okay? I think somebody wrote in the Times the other day, I don't know if these protesters would survive their lifestyle if they lived on the West Bank.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Especially the gays. They'd be killed.
Anybody.
I think just the other day, the pro-Hamas protesters disrupted the Pride Parade here in New York City.
It was yesterday.
Yeah. So, again, it becomes a question of at what point does your right to protest become an infringement on everybody else's right to engage in their activities, just like the taking over of school buildings. I mean, this is just, you know, this is something that needs to be addressed by administrations and by the individual schools or whatever the place is that they're taking over or protesting in, but also by the police department. What does the police department? What's our response to this? What do we do?
I was just about to ask you. How do you think the police in this country are handling the problem?
Cautiously, I think, because it's problematic. Because again, you're dealing with the infringement on certain rights and the right to protest, but at the same time, in many cases, you have to be called in on private properties. You have to be called in to take any type of police action against the destruction of property or the unlawful holding of a building.
Yeah.
You mean like Columbia University?
Like Columbia, yes.
Right, and I'm sure you went through that back in the 60s.
Oh, yeah, I was in 1968 when they took over Columbia. Right. They waited a week before the police were asked to come in.
The police are always, not just the NYPD, the last resort, and they're the ginger child of, okay, now what do we do? Let's call in the police. And when the police come, well, we really didn't want you to do that.
Right.
You know, I mean, they're occupying a building, destroying furniture. And what I think what people are forgetting is what happened to the rights of the majority? You know, the people. You know, what happened to these kids at Columbia that are paying $60,000 a year and hardworking parents putting their kids through school, and that student deserves an education. All right, I know universities are a learning ground, and that's great, but what about the 35,000 other students that just want to get a degree, graduate, and leave? What happened to majority rules? You know, you want to assemble, that's fine, but let me finish my classes, let me go on. I think we're kind of forgetting that, you know? What do you think?
Sure, no, I agree with you. Like the old rule used to be, yes, you have a right to protest, absolutely. And you have what we used to call sight and sound, within sight and sound. where you could be in a particular area and you had the visibility and you could be seen by the other people, but you didn't obstruct them from going into a building.
Correct.
Or you didn't take over something, like you say, and keep infringing on everybody else's right to be there to get their education and do what they're there to do. Yeah, sure.
Well, the Columbia takeover in 1968 was far worse than the most recent because a lot of cops got injured. In fact, someone I worked with suffered a broken back. He dropped his hat and he went to bend over to get it, and a kid jumped out the second floor window, landed on his back. And
Wow.
he broke his back. He went out on disability. He died a few years ago, but he suffered all his life. They made several hundred arrests, and it was pretty violent. That time we had the Tactical Patrol Force, and they went in and they did their job very well.
TPF.
But,
TPF.
but like everything else, the school waited too long. And the problem that people don't realize, if you don't act right away, things get worse because people get, the protesters get more and more emboldened. They see time goes by and they get crazier. If in Columbia, had the police moved in 68 and at this most recent one, it wouldn't have reached the proportions it did.
Right. And not only that, Ed, but the fact of the matter is, okay, let's send in the police. We'll clear house. We'll clean house. And then the universities don't want to pursue it.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so what kind of lesson, if this is a school of higher learning, what kind of lesson are you teaching? What are you learning from this exercise?
Well, the faculties have a lot to do with it also because of their ultra-liberal, maybe anti-Israel, backgrounds or outlooks in life. But something that a lot of people are not aware of, the police don't always have to wait. You can move in if somebody is the victim of a crime. You can go in because the police are a special class. There's a Latin term that I learned when I was studying schools, sui generis. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that, Rory?
Mm-hmm.
Sui generis means you're a special class and you
Right.
can't take action. You don't have to wait for somebody.
Right.
Now, the normal procedure is to wait for the school to call you in.
Right.
But when the police learn, for some reason, a phone call or however, that a student or more than one student is becoming the victim of a crime, you don't need the permission. You can just go in.
Right.
And I think that could have been done at Columbia, like when those two employees were held hostage. Do you remember that? And,
Yeah, the
and
two
when word
custodians,
came
yeah.
out that they were being, that was an opportunity for police to go in. So, it's not always the way things appear to be.
Well, Ed, that's always one of the inherent problems with policing is that because we're a response agency and we're often literally the first responders, we're there to deal with problems that are created by someone that no one else can deal with in the moment. And then when everything else is exhausted, who do you call? The police.
Right.
So then we're there, and then we're always subject to hindsight. Did you act too fast? Did you do too much? Did you do too little? So that's always the balance that the police agencies everywhere have to deal with.
And then we have to deal with district attorneys like Bragg. He cut everybody loose.
Yeah.
He dropped the charges. So there's another message that's going on. Hey, we can do this again.
Correct. So what are you sending? What are you telling people?
Right.
There's no crime and punishment, right? Listen, you want to break the law. I'm not saying it's fine, but there is some accountability,
Well, you know what? That was also back in our days. There was always a general understanding or general premise that the police were acting, at least initially, in the best interest of the public safety. So whatever actions they were taking were done out of that interest of public safety, and that the police were not trying to deliberately do something that was outside the law or committing some act of wrongdoing. But today, that tends to be a little different in a philosophy, I think, with politicians that, when we get subject to that after action report, so to speak, they look at it and say, well, why did you do that? And why did you do it that way instead of another way? And so sometimes we've lost some of that benefit of the presumption that we were doing the right thing.
It's a direction.
Yeah.
The direction. And then, listen, a city of 8 million, 35,000 cops, I get it. And we're in a city that's very politicized. I understand that. We have to answer to certain people. It's a lot of optics,
That's true.
And then there's this thing I call perception and reality.
Mm-hmm.
Perception, reality. we get it. But there's only so much you can do, and it's very demoralizing for morale.
Sure.
You know, I mean, guys, why should I do that when I have to do 9 pages of paperwork or more forms or what have you?
Well, we'll get to that later with the new law that went into effect today. Another hot topic I'd like you gentlemen to comment on is the nationwide crime problem. Not just New York City, but the rest of the country. What do you guys have to say?
What specifically in terms of nationwide crime?
Well, it seems that crime is on the increase nationwide in all categories. And the exact reasons, I don't know what they are. I'd love to find out. But I assume part of it is a part of it probably comes from the current administration. The Democrats.
Well, yeah, I think there's the pendulum swings in both directions, and for the last many years, it's been swinging on a more liberal tact where crime has been de-emphasized or it's been downgraded. So crimes that used to be considered crimes are not necessarily really crimes anymore, and there's a general leniency, I think, in society for people that commit certain crimes that aren't really viewed in the same way that they may have been viewed 20 years ago. You can certainly drugs is one of them.
Marijuana.
Yeah, marijuana. Absolutely. Look at marijuana today. In our day, you made arrests for marijuana. Today, everyone smokes marijuana everywhere. You can smell it everywhere you go. But I think that's part of the problem nationwide with crime increasing is because there's this general leniency towards the commission of crime and making excuses for it.
I agree. I'm not a social scientist. I think a lot of what we see as frontline guys is anecdotal, and I think a lot of it was COVID. There was this malaise. But in general, the lack of respect, not just for the police, but the uniform in general, civil service workers, uniform, like the lack of respect for, EMS people, transit workers.
Sure.
I mean, they're getting, these poor transit workers are getting assaulted every day. At least the police have a gun.
Yeah.
But these transit workers, it seems to be, and transit workers, like the police, are the government. We are the people. We represent society. And when you assault a policeman or a transit guy or a fireman, you're assaulting government.
Sure.
And then that's the lack of respect there. It really is.
And I think a lot of that also speaks nationally to the cynicism that people have about government, that lack of respect. They don't believe that you're there to do the right thing. They think that you're there to oppress.
Yeah. And we're not. We're not. And it's this knee-jerk reaction that politicians have. And I will go off topic and say, if politicians got vetted like police, went through a background, we would see how things would change.
Sure.
Everything is, they'll propose a law and they have no consequences or they don't think things out, and how many citizens are dying because of e-batteries?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, let's have e-bikes. I'm all for it, but there's a way to do things.
Sure.
Well, I was going to bring that up, the growing lack of respect for police. So it's interesting that you guys brought it out because it is a problem. And that segues into the
huge with recruiting.
Recruitment problem.
Yeah, huge.
There's a major recruitment problem. Rory, you're involved with many different organizations.
Sure.
What can you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still very much involved with a lot of the fraternal organizations within the NYPD, and I hear this all the time that both on the outside with people trying to with the job trying to recruit people to come into the job. There's that, again, like I said, that general cynicism about government and being involved in government, and particularly the police, because in many ways the police across the country have been demonized. They've been made the bad guy. So why would you want to come into an agency? Why would you want to put yourself in that position and be subjected to constantly being told that you're doing the wrong thing, or somehow you're a criminal, or somehow
Second-guessed.
yeah, you're second and triple guessed on everything you do. So yeah, it's very hard for recruitment and retention. It's the same thing, even it transcends even within the job with the fraternal organizations. A lot of people don't necessarily want to join anymore. In our day, everybody wanted to join an organization. I think we have one of the most diverse backgrounds in terms of different fraternal organizations within NYPD that one can belong to, whether it's ethnic fraternities or religious fraternities. There's tons of them, and everyone used to jump to join in an organization to be part of that mainstream. Today, people shy away from them because there's just that general concept of why do I want to get involved? I don't want to be involved with them, and somehow they feel almost humiliated to be involved with an organization because they don't want to be associated with the police department off duty or outside of work.
I agree. And also, who has time?
Yeah, well, that's another.
Who has time? I mean, there was a time where you could join an organization, you can go to the racket, but guys are, they're working overtime, they have a second job, another gig. They're not making enough money. And as far as the NYPD is concerned, I might as well go to the burbs. It's less stress. I might get a little more respect. It's more money. It's a lot of dynamics, Ed.
Well, you raise an interesting point because the burb people are trying to recruit cops from New York City.
Right.
They're having the same problem.
Sure.
And so New York
Everywhere.
City is losing people from the department to other places. Like, for example, we had a congresswoman on our podcast who was telling us that Texas is actually recruiting from New York, offering them everything.
Florida as well.
Florida, and it's a problem. Policing is no longer an honest profession. It's just a job, And
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head right there, Captain Ed. It used to be considered an honorable profession
and a calling, and a calling.
Yeah, and a calling.
Right.
Because I think everyone here, in this room would say that. You all felt the calling. We all felt the calling, because it was something higher than just a job. Being a policeman, being a police officer, was not just a 9 to 5, an 8 to 4 job. It was a lifestyle as well.
Yeah, I used to love to come to work.
Everybody did, yeah. And you took pride in yourself. You took pride in your uniform. You made sure everything looked right.
Yeah.
A lot of that's going out the window today.
The first 10 years of this job, now there are guys out there that are probably going to say, Tony, you're stupid. I didn't go sick. I wanted to come into work. And then you would come into work sick. Even though we had unlimited sick, it was like, what did I miss? What went on? Yeah. And it was such a great fraternity. It really, and it is still to this day, but I can't tell you, like, coming into work, like, what do we miss? Let's go. 10 years, I didn't go without a sick day. And it was because it was so much fun. It was, the job was incredible, and I don't know if this new generation, now I sound like an old man, is missing out on this, but
I think they are. Because you know what? I don't know if I should admit this on air, but I had the dubious distinction of having never gone sick in my entire career in a job.
You see?
And exactly what you said. It's because, you know what? You didn't want to miss anything.
Right.
Today, people they're happy. They're almost relieved when they don't have to come to work, or they do go sick and they miss something. You didn't want to miss anything. You wanted to be where the action was. You wanted to be there. I loved coming to work.
Yeah, the locker room was a great, like,
it was
what
great.
Happened, What happened yesterday? Oh, yeah, Johnny made this great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you should have seen it, and now it's a bunch of what I call 835 guys, right?
Right, exactly.
835.
Well, I love to say it was the greatest show on earth.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
It is.
And
It
you didn't wanna
was.
miss
And you
any
had front
act.
row seats to everything.
Yeah, I used to love the 4 to 12s. That's where all the action was.
Sure.
I mean, when I left the police academy, I went to the 79th precinct in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and man, that was a tough place.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait to go to work.
Yeah.
And I wanted to work nights because that's when all the action was.
But, again, that brings us back to the problem. It's that zeal for police work, I think, in many respects, across the country has been lost. Because I'm sure people in other agencies have the same feeling like that. There were guys that wanted to come to work every day. But because when you go to work and then you're criticized for what you do, and there's, instead of now the presumption that you were doing the right thing, somehow there's a presumption that you did the wrong thing, or let's critique it to the ground. People just don't want to be involved. They don't want to come and get involved and do that, take that extra step. You know, there was a level of forgiveness, I think, in our day. Even if you made the wrong decision, but you did it with the right intent,
right.
You know, you were essentially absolved. You were forgiven.
Your intent, that's a big thing. Yeah. I had a captain one time when I worked in the 109, and I made a little faux pas. And, you know, him being a good Irish, I'm not going to name him, but being a good Irish Catholic captain, he said, you know, Tony, that's really not a venal sin.
Right. Well, I had that said to me.
Right.
You know. What did I say? He said, we had a chief. He said to me it was a mortal sin.
Yeah.
I said, what the hell's a mortal sin? You know, I'm Jewish, so you know from that. And so I went to my lieutenant, who was a Catholic. I said, you know what the chief said to me? He said, I committed a mortal sin. I made a mistake on a report I prepared for him. He says to me, oh, how Catholic of him. This was another
but that was it, though. You know, you get spanked, you get the newspaper rolled up, hit over the nose.
That's right.
You learn from it. But now, and also, it's more punitive than ever.
Yeah, that's true.
And in the leadership, police work, I think, is not just NYPD, is the street is not a place to be. Get inside or go up the ranks and stay off the streets because you can't get in trouble. Yeah. And the job is missing out on, I think, especially the NYPD, because there's so much talent out there that we're having a brain drain. The equivalent of good guys, good citizens, good people leaving the job, and people don't want to come on. You know, that class of 1939 were
1940.
Where that
they were all college graduates.
Yeah. You know, brilliant.
In June of 1940. Getting back to the problem, we have a new problem. The New York City Police Department have a new problem today that the rest of the world should know about. Rory, you know about how many stops law goes into effect today. Can you elaborate on that, Rory?
I haven't read what exactly the full content on it now, but essentially what it's going to amount to is that it's now going to turn the street police officer into an administrative officer. Everything he does, every encounter he makes, he's going to have to document in some manner. He's going to have to write a report or put something down, try to get names, you know, what the content of the conversation was, what it's about, and it's all going to be essentially data-based. That and the premise, I believe, is supposed to be to say that to show that we're not profiling, that we're not unjustly or unduly stopping people for no particular reason. So even if it's, I think even when it comes down to just general inquiries, that we're going to have to now become the administrative department, where we're going to have everything reduced to paper. And that's going to be a problem for policing, because how do you engage in effective street policing, and how do you go about the business of crime prevention when every little thing that you do, you're going to have to stop and take the time to document it, write it down, catalog it? How are you going to do that?
Well, Tony, you can appreciate this. Imagine a detective in a major investigation. How many people do you speak to? In addition to having to prepare an investigative report, now you're going to have to prepare a separate report that I interviewed A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Am I correct? You get a major case, you could have 100 people to talk to.
Correct. I'm not up on this new one, but it's just, there's a lot of documentation. And even prior to this, when they passed the bail reform laws, there was a lot of what we call discovery. And we had detectives, we had to turn over a lot of stuff. I think it was within 5 days you had to turn over to the defense. I mean, you're a detective. You can't type fast enough to get everything else for discovery, for accuracy.
Sure.
You know, and to give to them. So there's
especially in
his
his day, because they were banging the old
typewriters.
metal keys.
Yes.
But you know that you think who's going to read these reports? So the department will produce thousands of these contact reports.
Exactly.
Who's going to read them? Where are you going to store them?
Well, that's what the job does. 35,000 people. The cloud, right? Even with the body cameras. Listen, I always said, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about. You know, bring on the cameras. Bring it on. I'm not doing anything wrong. Bring it on. It can absolve me. But you're going to have two types of policemen out on the street. Either the guy that entertains everything, which is good, or the guy that does nothing.
Right.
And he's going to roll up his windows in the RMP, in the police car, and just tune himself out in the world, or sit in the booth at the Cuban mission, you know,
Right.
and just, you know, read his Man magazine all day long. But you're going to get two type of guys. I don't want to be bothered.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Or I'll entertain everything. And how much room does that leave for police, for crime fighting, which is really what we're here for, crime fighting?
Well, I think that this new city council law is really going to bog the police department down. And you're right. Cops probably want it. They're going to say to themselves, why bother? I have to make out a contact report for everybody I talk to, so I'm not going to talk to anybody.
Yeah. That's the, listen, for 35 years I was a policeman. I understand the nature of police work. You know, the fine example is when they gave department property out, you know, the phones or the beepers. Guys were so afraid of losing that equipment because they would be penalized. What did they do? They threw it in their locker because they knew it would be safe.
It'd be safe.
It was safeguarded, right?
That's right.
Not like, I'm an active guy. How'd you lose your phone? I was chasing a guy down the street. No, I left my phone in the locker because I can't lose it and I won't get a rip.
That's right.
That's the mentality of the job. And this is that same mentality. They don't. I mean, you are an executive. I mean, you're like, you know how guys are, but I'm a ground guy, and I will forever be known as a ground guy, and I know how guys think. The guys in the building, 1PP, they don't ask us
You mean police headquarters?
Yes. They don't ask us what we think or how we feel on this. You know, I mean, it's
The Ivory Tower.
the Ivory Tower.
Puzzle Palace.
Puzzle Palace.
Well, gentlemen, this has been very interesting. Is there anything else you two would like to bring up before we conclude this great session?
I would like to say it's an honor to be here. Okay, this is my first podcast ever. I'm in like these Ed, Rory. I mean, I couldn't have a better first podcast. Two of you sitting in the audience, you know, sitting right next to me side by side. I am so honored to be here, and I couldn't think of a better crew.
I concur. This was great. Yep. And I'll put a plug in for police recruiting. Guys, girls, you're out there. If you're thinking about it as a career, absolutely. It is one of the best careers you will ever pick. It's a great job, and it'll enhance your life. You'll meet some of the greatest and best people you'll ever know when you come into a police agency.
Can I add to that?
You can say whatever you want.
Listen, you'll never get rich doing police work, but I could say it's honest work. You can look at yourself in the mirror every morning, and you know, in the goy world, you're doing God's work. You really are. We're doing a job that, you know, I always say, we're the ones that are running into gunfire when we hear shots fired. We don't run away.
Right.
Okay? All right? Fidelis ad mortem. That means something. Faithful to death. And that's what we are.
Yep.
Well, police work is a very honorable profession.
Correct.
And the world should know that. And it's unfortunate that, you know, police work is being dishonored by some lowlifes out there and some stupid politicians.
Well, with podcasts like this, Ed, I think discussions like this, we're bringing it back.
Yeah.
Good. Well, WABC listeners and viewers, if you like what you hear and like what you see on YouTube, you can view us on Cop Talk at WABC or many of the social platforms that are out there. And in closing, I want to say God bless the United States, God bless police everywhere, and God bless the New York City Police Department in particular. Thank
Hoorah.
you, gentlemen.
Amen.